All right, welcome back. Yes, y'all, and you don't stop. Big John, come rocking the short shot, baby. Yes, it's Cork Stats NFL Live, baby. Yes, presented by the Mayo Media Net. Really just got to stop. Hat tip to my dude, Patrick Mayo. I have met a ton of people in this industry. A lot of them are not what they appear. Pat is every bit you think he is and more. The man, the gentleman, the businessman. Pat, we absolutely love you and the audience out there. Thank you all for pumping up the Cork Stats MLB show to the way you have, doing the thing that we do, me and you, the Cork Stats crew. Come on. Could you lead off with anybody better? You can't hide out. Put him this handsome, baby. I am coming out the chair, as always, for my man who I would have to lead off with. The very best compliment, this is all kidding aside, the best compliment I have gotten in my short career in this industry, this thing of ours, is being compared to the nuance and context that my guest brings. It is quite literally the GOAT of podcast hosting. He is the GOAT of nuance and context. If you want to understand quite literally anything about football, you go to my man, Ian Hartitz from PFF. You got to listen to the show, him and Dwayne. Right now, it is the gold standard in NFL information because of the overlap that he and I share. We just go into our analysis with an open mind, looking to be convinced the other way, knowing we don't predict the future. We put ourselves in very strong probabilistic scenarios in order to succeed. Ian, what's up, kid?
Goodness, John, there's not too many podcasts I go on where I struggle to match the energy being thrown at me, but here we are. Love it. Love the way you clearly love the game, and happy to see you in the NFL streets. And shout out to the GOAT he mentioned before, Patty Mayo, and everything. Man, everything that guy can do. Like I just struggle to even talk about like non-football things because I just know how much time you have to put into these other subjects to like having an educated opinion. To see Pat jump from one thing to another and just again be top tier at everything he does, truly impressive. So yeah, man, appreciate you having me on. Happy to kick off this new show, and let's have a hell of one.
Yeah, this is gonna be kind of funny. You and I wear different hats, right? I'm a analyst, but I'm a content creator, but I'm also a consumer. And really that's where you step in. And all of that kind of powdering and stuff really was not exaggerated. I work extremely hard at baseball to bring that kind of nuance and context that I was mentioning. And I know that I bring it, but it's very difficult. You mentioned the hard work. And I'm not going to pretend to be able to be on the same level as people who have been preparing all year. Now, we have still quite a bit of time, so you don't have to be razor sharp at football just yet, but you should be kind of inching away, and that's what I want to be doing here with the show. Just once a week, I'm going to bring in my favorite people, my favorite men and women in the space. We're going to talk about everything. Ian, you kind of saw the outline, and gosh, it is everything. We spoke briefly beforehand, the transition between DFS, betting, fantasy, and really what it takes to go with that. So just real quick before we start, could you speak to just the flexibility really quick and just the malleability, and like I mentioned, how you're not really trying to be right,
Look, man.
Well, I shouldn't have said you're trying to be right, but we're not saying we're right. Right. We're not saying this is correct. That's what I meant.
One thing we were mentioning before the show, one of the problems with MLB is like it's just another slate's there. You could be trying to finish that night's game, and then you got 1 p.m. baseball coming up again. And the NFL, man, when you're doing it like we are in DFS and best ball and dynasty and redraft, there's just always something else to get your attention to. And at the same time, while I don't like to beat myself up after losses, I'm also not exactly going out there, patting myself on the back and taking a victory lap every single time things go right. And I'm not saying you can't ever do a victory lap. It's good vibes. I'm fine with that. And some people, freaking deserve it. And you worked hard. Go ahead and be happy. I'm fine with NFL players celebrating after touchdowns because I think that if someone didn't like it, they should stop them from getting to the end zone. So if you want a victory lap, go right ahead. But I just think, man, there's always something we can just be looking ahead to, and obviously refining our process and trying to make sure that we were doing the right things in the first place is important. But again, I just think it's on to the next one. Let's not be too high or too low about anything. And I think ultimately that helps you get through the grind that is, an entire year-round NFL calendar.
But what's really cool about that is one of my favorite saying that stuck is, when you work this hard, it feels a lot less like luck. And I think that goes both ways. It feels a lot less like luck when you win, and you feel a lot more confident even in the losing. It's very funny. This is something as a handicapper, I talk more about my losses than my wins. I believe there are way more lessons there. And again, the handling of the emotional capital greater than sign financial capital. For me, it's easier to earn dollars than it is repair a damaged psyche that we need to continue to work to put out that quality stuff. So you mentioned it. They call that in the business, they call it a segue. You mentioned the next thing. What's up next? I mean, it just feels like you guys are everywhere at all times. We're going to dive into a bit of that more, but what's on the horizon for PFF?
First of all, just selected Irv Smith and SFB round 11, so had to get that out of the way.
He burned me last year, but what can you do?
Yeah, he didn't even play last year. Now
I know, that's what I mean.
On that offense. Okay, so PFF, I am so excited for about right now. Actually, we have a PFF 40 sale going on. So if you have any ideas, inclinations of getting a PFF subscription, now's the time to do it. 40% off will get you literally all the locked article content, rankings, everything that we offer. We'll get you that with code PFF 40. And man, we're coming out with this new fantasy tool. I would say in the next 2 to 3 weeks that I really think it's gonna be one of the coolest things out there. I've always respected people like Player Profiler, who I think give a good snapshot of the page, and PFF just on advanced metrics. And just I've always been fascinated with the idea of giving everything that a fantasy manager, player, whatever the hell you want to call us, like needs at their fingertips in one spot. I think Fantasy Labs back in the day, under previous people, did a great job with their models of showing everything you need in one grid. And while it's not going to be a grid, I'm just, again, so excited about what we have coming up in terms of just being the true one-stop shop for everything you want to know about a player. And I think with myself, Dwayne McFarland, Nathan Yonke, Kevin Cole, providing the analysis behind it, man, I put us right up there with anyone. So incredibly excited about that. And, it's just actually convincing PFF to embrace fantasy football, because that's kind of the funny thing going on that I learned when I started working here. Like a lot of our, founding fathers here at PFF are European guys who, love football, but they just haven't really played fantasy and had no interest really for it over the years. So I think once they saw the extra dollars it can help bring in every August and September every year, they quickly changed their mind. But just very happy to just very happy to be somewhere where we just have all these wild tools, and now we're being able to use some of that just information we have that, just to be fair, a lot of other companies can't match, and now specifically integrating that into fantasy. Really can't wait to show off what we have coming.
I really can't wait. This is, again, we spoke a bit about it before. We're going to get into it more. Some of this is going to play like a PFF commercial, and that's fine, because I really fully back it. The highest compliment I can give anybody is that I use your work. I'm a nice guy, but I am a hyper competitive maniac. If you are not giving me the very best information in the most compact and digestible format, you're going to find yourself in the back of the line. That's just what it is. I'm moving fast. Guess what? I'm trying to move faster than I talk. That's pretty damn fast. PFF, you know what? Maybe we could even do some of it now, because we will. And we'll have that go into the first thing, which was how you consume games. But since we're on the topic of PFF, I really want to get into just everything PFF, because, all right, you guys give, if people aren't familiar, it really is, it's the must sub. Aside from that, it's very simple in its presentation. Numbers, 1 to 100, very easy to understand. Colors, very easy, 1 to 100, understand. The problem when you're using other people's work, Ian, of course, is there's a level of faith and trust I have to have. I like, what's a 98 to an 82, or, I don't know. So I have a bit of history watching games, and I know what I'm looking for. So I mentioned this in the outline. It's not that I don't like you. I don't trust you at first. I have to verify it before I trust you. And once you earn the trust, you can have it, because it's very hard to get. And I know I went back and tested by hand a lot of these grades independently, meaning I did not have your grade. I went on my own, because I just can't sleep at night knowing that sometimes I have a lot of money on these games, knowing that one of the critical points, one of the determinant factors, is a subjective element that I can't really validate. And again, so many people do. There's wisdom to the crowd. They were probably right, but I went to double check it, and hot damn, confirm. Your stuff is phenomenal. Oh my goodness, phenomenal. I have never spoken to a single one of you, and it's really in lockstep with my own. Again, granted, it's not professional training, but I have learned with a football coach how to watch a game. Again, not scouting every player. I'm not trying to be something I'm not, but what to look for and keep those critical notes. Talk to me. How do you guys consume these games?
Well, first of all, shout out to all the graders doing all that. And man, it's really not as some of the flack that PFF grades tend to get on the old Twitter sphere sometimes. It really is just trying to fill. And there's a commercial about this where Collinsworth was showing the play where I forget if it was Aaron Rodgers. There was just a quarterback throwing a pick that bounced off his wide receiver's chest. Like, it's just trying to add some context to the few spaces we still have between stats. Like, it's weird when you hear these like anti-analytic people, and then like they still fall back on stats. They just end up drawing a line in the sand where when they stop understanding what a stat is telling them, they call that a no good, analytic that they want nothing to do with. So I just think, again, just being open to stuff that helps contextualize and quantify what we're seeing on the field. Like, yeah, I think we all agree QB rating and yards per attempt for guys like Jimmy Garoppolo maybe don't necessarily imply that he's one of the best quarterbacks out there. Just like I'm not going to take one single PFF grade for a guy and just assume that tells his entire body of work. So it always pisses me off.
What about the actual consumption? Is it a team of people doing every game? Does one person get a game? So am I relying on a single person, a group of people? I know people have asked me that question.
Yeah, it's a group of people, and again, that's
good. That's good.
I'm not specifically involved in the, inputting and outputting of all that information, but I just, I see the, I can like see the Google sheet where they're like finishing off games and stuff and getting everything ready to go. And man, like they were doing that for USFL. So they're really not.
Is it computer tracked? I've had that question also.
Some of it is we're getting more and more once we start getting some of the better tracking information. I think we have like mile per hour stuff coming in soon.
Okay,
so because once we have all that, like why we don't need a combine anymore. Like who cares? We can just get the actual football movements that matter. And obviously, some guys, if you've ever played the game, like everyone knows that, there's the guys, when we're running in freaking March and April that are finishing first, and there's guys that are finishing first when the pads are on before practice in August. So very excited with some of the possibilities that are down the line.
Now, how about you personally? Because we're probably not going to get to it. Are you working? Do you get to watch games? Are you do you have to watch and analyze a game on Sunday? Are you recreationally watching? Like, how does Ian, like, what's he doing? Are you like us? Are you covered in barbecue sauce and stuff?
So I do the about 2-hour podcast with Dwayne at the end of every night. So I'll usually maybe have a drink or two before that and then another one or two during it, but I can't do too much further past that. The good news is I've gotten my Saturdays pretty much clear. So I'll be right there with the barbecue sauce all over my face on Saturday. Sunday, basically, man, I've been on some pregame shows and stuff before, which has made it a little bit difficult to be as ingrained in my personal DFS game as I'd like to be. But this year, really, I'm going to have a better chance than ever. So see ya in those streets more than ever. In terms of when the games start, so before NFL Game Pass decided to nuke their own product, like awesome job there, guys. Like I would basically, once the 1:00 games finished up, and I could usually watch 2 or 3 just in my living room, keeping an eye on everything and not missing much, maybe have Red Zone on my laptop or something, but it was trying to watch like 3 games there. And then once the condensed games came out, I'm still watching a live game, but now I'm just ripping through condensed games, and I could watch every game from Sunday by about the starting point of the 4th quarter of Sunday Night Football. And I would have everything watched, to a pretty good level. And for me, when I'm watching those games, I'm trying to watch for the things that we're just not readily going to see in the box score. I always tweet the sheesh alerts out there. So it's like, it's like the nullified touchdowns, overthrows to wide open receivers, a big time drop. And we can track some of this. I know there's like unrealized air yards and thing, but especially before some of those stats are finalized, it's just important on Sunday. So those are some of the big things there. And obviously any injury stuff is important as well. So just trying to do that. Unfortunately, when again, Game Pass they just stopped doing condensed games until the next day. So there's nothing I could really do there. Luckily, though, going and working in the PFF offices now, we actually have like an 8 TV setup, all big screens. They play every single game across from each other. So with that, I could reliably, because it's like one square, so I could reliably watch like 4 of those games basically at once, and another 4 at 4 o'clock. So I would say if we're talking about 12 games a night, I probably had a good chance to watch like 9 of them. And I would love to try to go back to all 12, but again, freaking Game Pass. Just anyone out there from Game Pass listening to this, man, just go back to 2019. I've never seen this happen with another product, how much more difficult they make it. But yeah, whatever I missed then, I go back and watch Monday morning. So I understand like people with full-time jobs and stuff, and you have a family and a life. It's probably kind of hard to try to watch every single NFL game by Monday morning. But if you are in the industry, I just think it's going to do you a lot of favors. You're not going to be that guy chastising a player for only having like 21 yards when you actually missed his wide open, target that went sailing out of bounds. You're not going to be, missing the nullified touchdowns and things of that matter. So I do think it will help separate you. And again, going back to the original kind of starting point of this conversation, like that's going to help you pick the stats that make the most sense, because we see when people get ridiculed, it's when they pull some BS stat out that isn't matching what we're seeing on the film in the first place. So,
the very last thing on consumption, because this again, I fall into because it's so entertaining, and then I realize it's probably not the best for me. Again, like yourself, you're trying to make good use of that time. How do you feel about Red Zone? Again, I love the product. I think it's phenomenal. I love nothing more than to sit there with my eyeballs glued open for 7 hours. But sometimes I feel like I don't really leave with what I want to. And I have found, this is anecdotal, so everyone's different. I have found I have quite literally watched 7 hours of Red Zone, only to realize I had to go back and watch every single game because I really didn't get a feel for almost anything. And then you notice when you're a Jets fan, sometimes the game's not even on Red Zone. They don't even show you anything. And you can't assume because the game wasn't on Red Zone that nothing important happened from an analytical standpoint. So I have found, as much as I enjoy it, I need to be doing what you're doing. I'd rather see full games in combination and then try and work in the condensed stuff the second I can.
Yeah, Red Zone's awesome. Like,
right.
Friends are doing it. Like, I completely see why people just watch that and nothing else. So it's good. I like having it on basically a side TV just because you really don't miss any of the big action going on. So just from a pure like fantasy standpoint, just being able to get every touchdown of every game. And shout out to Scott Hansen. I don't know how that dude like is just able to do that 7 straight hours and not have like everyone freaking hate him. I mean, come on, man. Like, you know how it is. Like you're gonna. That's why even guys like Colin Cowherd and some other people, like they say some dumb shit, but it's like when you're on the TV for that long, like every day, day after day, of course you're gonna like mess up here and there. And again, for Scott Hansen, such a high approval rating, I think, going through that. So long story short, love Red Zone in terms of actually trying to track the games, though. Nah, it's not that great.
Yeah, it comes across like fast food almost, right? It tastes really good, but it's not really what you're looking for if you're looking to get something great out of it, right? So I think that's probably my favorite analogy. All right, let's get into some more the more nuts and bolts. We began speaking about some of the subjective stuff. I just want to expand a touch more on it. You mentioned them briefly, but I really think they deserve a bit more of a highlight. And I would like you to speak to your subjective stats in general, your favorite ones. I want to highlight my favorite ones that I have found are really, it's the chef kiss that matters, right? And I'm referring specifically to big time throws and turnover worthy plays, BTT, TWP, respectively. Again, big time throws. How do you describe it? I don't know. It just makes sense. When you see it, you kind of know.
Yep.
And a turnover worthy play is probably to me the most important. Because I worry a lot of times about the subsequent impact, like afterwards. Like, all right, you go out, Mahomes was a victim of this a lot of times, and people wondered why he would regress so hard. But when you're going to play such a wild style that's kind of unregulated, you open yourself up to variables, swinging arms and stuff. If you're going to be on a lean, throwing a ball sidearm, you're going to open yourself up to other variables. Balls getting popped up, coming from weird angles. I mean, this is all things that we know about. And that you want to know. But if that happens in the beginning of a drive all the time, and this guy should be turning the ball over and over again. This isn't a Mahomes thing, just anybody in general. Carson Wentz subjective to this all the time. You watch this guy do things that are just unbelievable. And I was a big backer of the Colts early on. We made a ton of money betting the Colts. They were underdogs every week. I love the Colts last year, watching them from an analytical standpoint. But he would do things that are just maddening. To your point, and then I want you to take the floor, is you guys finally kind of at least quantified that for us. Because if you look at the Wentz stat sheet and it says, again, 265 and 2-1, Carson Wentz-esque, but there were 4 turnover-worthy plays. That's very worrisome, and those don't show up anywhere else. So speak to me about those if you like those, you don't like those, and what your favorite subjective stuff is, because it's really the best.
Yeah, I mean, turnover-worthy play rate, I think, is awesome because everything you just said. And it also helps remove when, they have a freaking good pass that hits their receiver and ends up getting intercepted, like that Gerald Everett game last year. That was just so brutal. He had one of those from poor Russ in that one. But yeah, turnover-worthy play rate, I think, is great. And it's just when you fumble, but you recover the fumble, that's still a turnover-worthy play. And I think it does help contextualize guys like Carson Wentz, Drew Lock, and those sorts that, don't always make the smartest decisions out there. Big time throw rate, I think, is a little more descriptive than necessarily predictive, or even, I think it's a piece of the puzzle like anything else, but we see really good quarterbacks that don't even necessarily need to have that high of a big time throw rate. I mean, you could argue that you shouldn't really be attempting that many big time throws, because a lot of times these are these tight window passes, and it's like, yeah, it's great you did it, but if that ball's a couple feet to his left, now it's probably going down the books. That's a turnover worthy play instead. So big time throw rate, I would say a little more descriptive, again, instead of something that you want to necessarily just completely judge a quarterback with. But again, I think these stats do a great job of really showing what we're watching out there. Last year, Kyler Murray was actually I think he had the widest difference in the league in terms of just being an elite big time throw rate and also having a really low turnover worthy play rate. Now I've checked the opposite, like looking at who has basically the highest, I call it like an entertainment rating, basically, because I was trying to put something to help show what I liked about Drew Lock. So last year, Justin Fields was actually number 1 in highest big time throw rate, and then also having like a brutal turnover worthy play rate. Before him, it was Drew Lock. Before him, it was the 30-30 Jameis Winston season, of course. And I think before that, it was Ryan Fitzpatrick. So we actually still see guys like Mahomes and Josh Allen kind of rank a little bit higher in the turnover worthy plays than you'd expect. But honestly, when you're that good, like, you probably should be taking some more of these chances. And that's what helps us show like Justin Herbert, someone that has an average target depth down there with like Jared Goff and some of these, dink and dunk quarterbacks. And you're like, okay, this is actually an example where Justin Herbert, you should probably be taking more risks because of how damn good you can be out there. So yeah, again, just never once, I feel like, in that discussion was I saying like either of those stats is the be all end all for any of these guys. But once again, what stat is, let's just try to help paint the clearest picture possible.
Are there any other of those kind of stats you guys have created that you're really proud of, or there may be some I forgot? Because again, I admit I'm really just kind of scratching the surface. I really, we're going to get into this, will be next, but I do think about PFF is similar to, in baseball, it's StatCast, Baseball Savant, right? When you think about expected stats and other stuff, It's almost like the human brain. You're like the most advanced person knows how to use like 3% of it, and there's just all this unrealized information going on. So are there any other subjective stats that you guys have that maybe, you feel maybe need to be put to the fore that aren't yet?
Yeah, we have missed tackles forced for a lot of stuff, which it's not really subjective, but it is one of those stats though where I think you see it with certain running backs, like the Tony Pollard hive out there. And Tony Pollard's awesome.
Yeah.
But there is something to be said about guys like him and Javonte Williams, who, they really do make a habit of bouncing the ball outside. And their type of running style, I think, just lends itself more clear to highlights. And I think there's something to be said about coaches probably when they draw up these plays in their mind and stuff. They would probably prefer, if the ball's supposed to go in the B gap, when Zeke's picking up 4 or 5 yards in the B gap, Pollard's bouncing it outside. One play is getting 15, one play he's getting stuffed. I'm not that surprised that we see these coaches who know so much more about football than us, like, okay, I really think and again, Pollard's really good, Javonte's obviously really good, but I'm more so sticking up for like Zeke and Melvin Gordon here, because sometimes I don't think the missed tackles force metrics are quite as indicative of total running back performance as we make them out to be. The other one that I think we're starting to do some really good stuff with as a community is separation statistics, and just doing a better job of tracking separation, which we do on an every route basis, not just when the ball is thrown their way, because there's been this idea that contested catch artists like can't separate. Terry McLaurin led the NFL in contested catches last year. So is he not a good route runner? Like, of course not. He's a fantastic route runner. There was this play against the Falcons I was using where in Heineke's defense on this one, he was under pressure, so it's hard for him to get the ball out. But Terry McLaurin literally puts this cornerback into dirt. But by the time the ball got to him, the guy had gotten up, run over, and made it a contested situation. Now, Terry still caught the touchdown because he's a baller. But that was the whole thing. That was the whole thing coming out for Drake London, just hearing how these contested catch numbers are showing off his lack of separation, when a lot of times the receiver can create separation. It's the bad pass that actually turns it into a contested catch situation. So again, just trying to, as much as we can, continue to just fill in the pieces of the game and become smarter. Eric Eager, our head of research and development, and his, one smart intern after another that is just coming to work with us is so great. They've done some really good stuff this summer, looking at how coverages do when even like when one person doesn't do their responsibility. And it was showing the defenses that most often have a perfectly well-versed coverage group. And they've done that same kind of thing with the offensive line. So yeah, here and there, because I hear NFL players like, oh, you guys don't know what the play call is. How can you know the responsibilities? So I'm not saying it's 100% perfect all the time, but man, like, instead of just shitting on this one instance of PFF, like, show me something else that does a better job than us at doing it. So I guess that's my thing. Again, like, I'm not saying everyone in our company can't be a little bit, I think they could be a little more chill when discussing this stuff, especially on Twitter sometimes. But I just think that, ultimately, we're trying to make us all smarter about football. Right. We all love football. We're just trying to talk about it, and we're trying to give more of a voice to these positions and players that previously are just being judged on like Pro Bowls or tackles or these other stats that are way more flawed in the first place. So again, a lot of cool stuff on the way, and I believe we're helping do more good for the football community than harm. I hope everyone continues, and if you haven't realized it yet, I hope you do.
Dude, you just put on a clinic. My baseball people are just nodding furiously to all of that, because that was all of the nuance and all of the context that I promised everybody on my show the last couple of days after I knew that I had you. Just a couple of those things. Yes, we want runners that go north and south. Everybody, with the way defenses are changing to adapt to high-speed offenses, they are more hybrid linebackers now. These players are extremely fast to the sidelines. They're extremely fast. Every team seems to have one guy that's, 40 pounds lighter than you might expect of a lineman, and he just gets out there. And yeah, he may be victim to that missed tackle forced, but then he threw off that run to where it's not very productive. And it kind of makes all the points that you said, where you end up seeing check marks in the stat boxes that could be a bit misleading. Last thing, what you were mentioning about contested catch rate, which, gosh, I really love it. It's going to be a perfect segue. You should do this for a living, Ian. Is my first thought was, that's a really good idea. And the second thought was not, this is a bad idea, is this sounds like it'd be more dependent on the quarterback than initially not suggested that I initially might have thought, right? If you're take a look at you. You're an absolute Adonis and physical specimen for the non-video people out there. Ian would have, let's say, 5, 10, 25 yards on me. But if you throw a pop-up and he's got to come back to me, he might have to make a contested throw when he had me completely burned. So, like, right there is one perfect example of why that stat is okay. And again, gosh, man, Ian, if I could get you into baseball, let me know. Because that is often I talk about the tapestry. You're talking about the very same thing, just using different wording. But people, right? I often talk about the tapestry. It's a part of the quilt, right? Without it, you still may be warm, but you can't have too many holes in it or you're going to be freezing, right? But you also can't wrap yourself in a single fiber. You can't do that. You can't take, no matter how much time you spend on that one square decorating it, you cannot wrap your body in it. It can never be enough. No one stat should ever tip that scale, right? Those plates on the scale and have it tip over. Here is the segue into really what I really wanted to get into, being very selfish as an analyst. And this is my most fun part about covering football, is it's so very different for me. People that follow my work know I'm very analytically driven. It's almost cold and annoying at points. I try and do my best to use the stats to paint a picture of a profile, but it's still a lot of numbers because I feel like baseball offers you the frequency of events to use spreadsheets. We also can't watch it all, be physically impossible. Football, to me, not like that. Too many variables for me. Play calling, punching and counterpunching, all the different moving pieces, plus the subjective element of officiating. For me, football is just not a spreadsheet sport. I've done very well in football, attacking it almost the opposite of the way that I do baseball. I love last year. Some stuff we'll get into. I love last year's trash. I love all the boring old guys. Like, I'm not chasing. I don't expect leaps in quarterback play. I don't wish cast production on people. That's not what I do in football. You know what I like? I like young running backs. I like good quarterbacks. I like fast-paced teams. I'm pretty much like, there's some Ooga caveman analysis. Like, that's as good as I go with it. So here was the nuts and bolts of it. Okay. Again, props to PFF because they are at the fore of the stat revolution. This was my question to you. I've been saying the NFL is undergoing a next-gen StatCast revolution that Major League Baseball underwent years ago. The problem with the inception of these new statistics, they often bring on a subsequent misuse, overuse, however you want to put it. You mentioned misframing before. That happens all the time. Yeah. Are you afraid, you, Ian, that it could happen or is happening in football? And if so, do you have any example of like something that maybe people chase? I'll give you a baseball one. Earned run average, right? Is the most obvious statistic, is the most meaningless. It is not a part of my model that has 2,500 hours of testing on it. It's not part of it. So, Ian, speak to us about the revolution, man. You know, because that's what it is, and you're part of it. You are the tip of the spear. I know you're not into taking credit. I'll give it to you. What's going on, man? What do we have to look out for? Pitfalls, rakes to step on, and the like, you know?
It's the idea that, and there is plenty of evidence showing young running backs are a good priority, particularly in dynasty land. I just think we are picking and choosing sometimes when we're saying that these guys are washed or they suck. And ultimately it comes down to opportunity. That's why when it's week 8 and, you know, shout out to Dearness Johnson, he had a good year, but this was a former AAF guy with a 4.8 40 who's like never had a big game. And yeah, the Browns kept him on the field for like 90% of the snaps, and he ripped off 2 RB1 weeks and 2 times he was leaned on. Like, it's only during these months that we're talking about a guy's breaking tackle ability and his vision and all this. And that's all important things. If you're a football coach, you better be concerned about that. If you're a football player, you better be concerned about that. But in fantasy, man, it just comes down to that opportunity. And I think sometimes we just tend to, guys like Javonte Williams and Tony Pollard, like guys that are so good in real life, and we know it. Like, we're not playing real life football, we're playing fantasy football. And when a lot of times, you know, these running backs just get an entire point per reception, it's just gonna be tough for anyone to make up for that doesn't have that same sort of dual facet just workload going their way. So that's why we see guys like, before Josh Allen became a great real life quarterback, he was always a great fantasy quarterback just because he runs. So that's, I think, something going on this year with Justin Fields, for example. Like, yeah, Bears offense is terrible. They're also terrible last year, and he had 4 top 12 finishes in his final 4 starts because he runs the ball. Like, the only, looking at quarterbacks that rushed 100, it was 125 times in a season over the last 10 years. Like 2020, the Patriots, Cam Newton, who was like QB 17 fantasy points per game, only guy outside the top 12. That's it. I think there were 13 examples, and Cam was the only one. And that's points per game. I'm not being the dickhead that, you know, just uses he played 17 games. Look how he had more fantasy points than the guy who played 13 games. So even on a per game level, the Russian quarterbacks are just out of this world. So again, the main point I was getting at first is just assuming these guys suck, because I hear that about Saquon Barkley, and they'll say, look, he averaged 3.7 yards per carry. And it's like, okay, what about James Conner or Alvin Kamara averaging 3.7 yards per carry? It's just only holding it against certain guys. Yards per carry in and of itself is one of the most useless fantasy stats out there. Like, if you literally made Jonathan Taylor, if you took he was at 5.5 yards per carry last year. Like, if you took that down to 2.5. So you take Jonathan Taylor from like the best running back in the league to the worst running back in the league, and you keep everything else the same, like, he would have still been the RB5 overall. That's why we didn't care about the offensive line in Pittsburgh with Najee Harris, because of that sweet, sweet volume. Last thing, just really be careful about being an injury predictor extraordinaire, because every doctor I've talked to in the industry can't really do it. So I'm not so sure that we should be all that confident in it. And as much as everyone wants to go like, oh, I told you Christian McCaffrey was going to get hurt last year. Like, yeah, you said that was going to happen to Joe Mixon as well. So I'm not saying that there's a big difference between, here's the thing. There's a big difference between guys who are already hurt and coming back from an injury versus just a healthy running back that you're like, oh, he's going to break down at some point. What if he doesn't? Like, do we really think like Jonathan Taylor, who is just running into the teeth of the defense every single game, is he necessarily worlds more injury prone than like less injury prone, I should say, than like Christian McCaffrey? I really don't think so. And again, just being able to accept that risk when it's just being mispriced is one of those things to take advantage of. Final thing that I've noticed, it's more so to your point, people are just so in the weeds of a lot of this stuff now. And especially I think in the off season when mock drafts are going big and it's prospect evaluation. And sometimes people, I think, overestimate our own ability to break down these players when ultimately you can be right on a player like a backup that should be playing, but it doesn't matter, man. It matters what the coaches do with that guy. So I see a player like Jahan Dotson, who went 16th overall to Washington. Looks like he's set up as the number 2 target there behind only Terry McLaurin. Like just from that alone, if we only just knew it's like 16th overall pick, he's going to be looking at triple digit targets. Like he'd be going way higher than he is right now. I'm convinced he's going outside the top 60 wide receivers because people had him usually ranked outside the first round, or they had him outside the top 5 receivers. Like when players go higher in the draft, this should be a good thing. This should be a good thing for Velus Jones, for Tyquan Thornton, for Alec Pierce. This should be a good thing. But because it goes against whatever mock draft you read in April, you think it's a bad pick and you almost penalize the player for it. So again, it's really focusing don't be overconfident in our ability to predict this. And this goes back to, not getting too high or getting too low with stuff. Like, hey, Velus Jones, if he goes out there, I know he's old, but if he starts and he's freaking running by everyone in the preseason, like you're damn right I'm going to be interested in the guy. So Don't be out on a player before we've seen him play a professional snap. That was Josh Allen, Daniel Jones, even Justin Herbert, man. Like when these guys got drafted, like the entire world laughed at them. And all those guys, even Daniel Jones as a rookie, gave some good fantasy value. So don't just write guys off because they're going to get injured or because they suck, and try to, keep that same energy looking at the whole, picture across as many players as possible. So very, very long answer. I'm not exactly sure if I answered your question, but yeah, just a little 2 cents there.
All the Ian, bro. All the Ian. I think I speak for everybody in the Mayo media familia right now. All the Ian. Now, to that point, and because again, man, I'm listening and I'm thinking, and it's funny, baseball, again, not to keep bringing it up, but it really just offers so many opportunities of using stats. And right, I think not like it puts it in front, but just from an experience standpoint, there's so many events and so many opportunities over and over and over again. We're constantly getting a chance to test stuff. One thing I've noticed where baseball analysts get into trouble, the one thing I've noticed that I think I'm seeing, again, I'm being very reticent about planting flags in football. Right now, I'm in consumption phase, right? I'm sponging, I'm listening, I'm gathering data. My favorite Lincoln quote is, you give me 5 hours to chop down a tree, I'm going to spend the first 4 hours sharpening my axe. You know what I'm saying? But that's how I am. That's really how I am. I'm going to sit there as people are, look, what is he doing? And I'm like, watch, you'll see. And because I want to make sure that my positions are very well researched. I mentioned before, we have people like yourself going around the clock. So I'm not going to pretend there's too much of that, of the bravado and who's going to be more hot takey-ish and more correct than the other person. Me, I'm more of a rising tide lifts all ships, guys. I look to you because I know you're well researched. If I don't agree, I'm going to look on my own, and I'm going to see, knowing that, well, I also know you're may not be a best example of Twitter, you know what I'm saying? But the idea being, you got to be open and malleable. To the mistake that I was mentioning was using multiple stats that kind of try and say the same thing. In baseball, it's power statistics, right? So it's all these, it's barrels and blasts and hard hit, and you're like, dude, they're all the same thing. He hits the ball hard. Like you can't give me 5 different descriptions of how someone hits the ball hard and expect that to be more indicative of something more persuasive, let's say. I've been noticing with running backs, I'm getting a lot of this. Now, you didn't mention the missed tackles forced, but you also prefaced it properly. I'm hearing about its secondary explosive rate and all this burst. And man, I don't know what to make of that because of the variables that I mentioned before. One defender, a half a step out of place changes that. And I worry about that. I've tried to simplify it again, ugga sometimes for me, but it works. Does a running back have home run speed or not? Like, again, baseball, gosh, I'm gonna get smoked eventually for this. But right, you think of a guy like Chris Johnson, when he got daylight, he was gone. You think of a guy like Derrick Henry, he gets daylight, he's gone. Frankly, there are times, Ian, when I just want the eye test. I don't care about his second. I don't care about any. It literally could not mean less to me. I want the player with space that scores a touchdown. It's weird because generally with baseball, I'm like, but remember to make sure that we're calculating the angles of the standard deviation of his launch angle and all these weird things. In football, it's more like, listen, it's an instinctive game, more physical tools, physical prowess, where, gosh, people look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, is the guy a baller or not? Is he tough? Does he have fortitude? Does he show the willingness to learn, adapt to his craft, and try and get better? Because I'm into repetitions, right? So one of the reasons I did excellent in football last year, best ball and all that stuff, was I was like, wow, we have college guys, we have college quarterbacks that are going to be getting their wide receivers from college. That seems like a good thing. Yeah. They're going really high in drafts, right? And it was like, no, they're rookies. I was like, wait, is he really a rookie? If Burrow has thrown Chase 3,500 passes in his life, they're not. He's not a rookie. He knows where he's going. It's about, you know what I'm saying? This is where I'm like, am I the weird guy? Well, no, don't answer that. But this is where my type of analysis I feel is different because maybe it's just oversimplified. But I played football at a very young level, but I know when you can just have that quick glance and know he's going to break, there's something to that. That's not in the stat sheet. So I guess I kind of did the same thing where I went round and around. But, about this double stats, the double counting of the stats. So do you think there is something to that? Or maybe I need to stay in my lane and let the football guys kind of do their thing? Because that's what I'm worried about. We're trying to over-describe. He's really good.
Yeah. Again, yeah. And it's a lot of times we don't man, you got to be really confident a guy is that much better to make up for, potential 10-touch difference. That's like, for example, when we talk about mobile quarterbacks coming in and helping the run game, that's always a big talking point from, real football media, when a team makes when Jalen Hurts comes in for Carson Wentz, like, oh, this is going to help the run game because it's going to be more diverse and there's going to be read options. And that's going to help, put the defensive end in disarray and it's going to widen up the gaps. And I've done research showing LaShawn McCoy with Tyrod Taylor and Michael Vick versus the more stationary quarterbacks. And yeah, the yards per carry goes up. You see that across the league when we've gotten these examples. And I think that's easy enough to wrap your mind around. But again, who cares if you're averaging an extra 0.3, 0.4 yards per carry if you're losing freaking goal line rush attempts to the quarterback and if they're scrambling instead of, throwing targets to you in the check down game. So a lot of times it just comes back to what that opportunity is trying to tell you. And in regards to the home run speed, a lot of times it's the hole there for you. The amount of examples, remember, who was it? Bilal Powell, 5 years ago or whatever, he runs for a 70-yard touchdown because he trips and everyone thought the play was dead and he stands up and he runs for a score. I don't know. I've heard Dave Montgomery does, and I don't really think Dave Montgomery necessarily has this one hitter quitter speed, but I don't know. He scored an 80-yard touchdown against the Texans in 2020. What more do you want? At this point. So no, there are guys like Chris Johnson and Adrian Peterson. My God, once you see that gallop in the open field, you knew he was gone. So there are, certain levels of just, my God, Jonathan Taylor, probably just that level of freaking good, man. But even some of these other guys like Larry Johnson, LaDainian Tomlinson, Priest Holmes, these guys are getting 350 plus touches. Now you got to be good enough to earn that. But there's a reason why we always see these backup running backs, and when they're given that role, they put up big numbers. It's just so hard to bust on that sort of big volume, particularly if you're going to be in a good offense. So yeah, just in general, double counting, particularly some of those. Again, is the guy a dog or not? Has he got the dog in him or not, man? And leave the rest behind.
There is nothing wrong with that sometimes. I think that's exactly where people get in trouble, feeling like, oh, this is not sufficient. I need to throw things that don't matter. No, we don't want that, right? We don't want, sometimes less is more. I wonder if you're going to get a smile out of this. It's tongue in cheek, but it is kind of true. I've described it, Ian, as frog DNA from Jurassic Park. There's only so far the numbers are going to take us. We're never going to predict the future. And then it's up to who has a better understanding of the frog DNA, of which points to connect, where to take the leap of faith. And, and it's subjective. Sometimes this thing of ours is as much art as it is science. So that was kind of all of the stat stuff at once. The only question I didn't get to is how awesome and lucky are you to have Dwayne? Because I find myself, I'm a bit of a solo act where, I'm the one-man band generally. And gosh, sometimes I wish that, I struggle for that. Like I've struggled trying to find player partners in fantasy. I've struggled even with podcast partnering. I eat the mic. I get it. I get it. All right. But, all that being said, there is something to four eyes better than two. You guys are now tweeting together. That was pretty awesome. I don't know how that happened. I was like, this is just phenomenal. No, but all kidding aside, how much do you think that strengthens your game? My question is this. Do you feel, because I feel this about you guys, that your 1 + 1 = 3?
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, the co-tweets thing, it was Friday night, so I was having more than a few drinks with the lovely fiance, and I figured out what it was, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is hilarious. So I must have probably sent like 10 to 15 co-tweet requests to people last night, and Dwayne accepted it. John Daigle, shout out, said Drew Lock QB1 as well. And then didn't quite get Denny Carter to agree with me that kickers are bullshit, but that's okay. Yes, so it was fun doing the coach tweets. But yeah, man, I was doing the solo act like you when I first got to PFF, and just it's so hard, man. Like I know people on radio it's doable because you usually have a break every 12 minutes or so. But man, with a podcast, like I talk fast like you do, and it's just hard not to sometimes when you're the only guy in there, and then you got to try to control your breath. And then, people are hearing you talking to their freaking ears. So anytime it's like the amount of people complain to me over the years, oh, you swallow too loud or this and that. It's like, I'm sorry, man. I'm trying to do this. It's, I'm sitting here alone in a room talking to a freaking little camera thing. So gets in your own head sometimes. So no, I absolutely love having Dwayne on there. He's the only guy I've ever worked with who I feel like can consistently match my output and just willingness to continue to talk about fantasy. I mean, it's almost like a joke at this point where before every podcast, like, oh, okay, we should be able to get this done like 45 minutes there, whatever. And, we're still talking 90 minutes in and like it's a need to finally cut things off. So true love of the game and just having someone as sharp as him to keep me in line and bounce ideas off. And we are on the same page, I think, more times than not, which like good. We're freaking talking to each other like 5 hours a week, basically. I'd hope that at some point we're having kind of a similar thought in a lot of things, but there are times where we disagree, and we respect each other's processes enough to be okay with that. So can't say enough good things. And also just having Kevin Cole doing always his cool stuff at pff.com, Nathan Yankee, resident fantasy pros ranking expert. It's again, I just really love this group, and no one else I'd rather be working with.
Yeah, I wanted Dwayne to be the very last part of the statistical discussion, one, because he is just the GOAT, and also what was it? I mean, I had it right here that oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. Oh yes, that to the use of stats, it's not more stats. This is what I wanted to get on. Dwayne's, where I believe he separated himself from the pack, is the split situational statistics are really impactful. Now, I would love to get him on because again, it's not so much pushback. I get in trouble with this stuff all the time with Peach Bowl, orders of magnitude smarter than myself. But like for me, the one pushback I have with, and again, it's not him or you, it's when we describe situations as neutral or not neutral. I feel like the way the game has changed and the speed with which it changed, 10 points is almost not neutral anymore. It almost has to be beyond 14 for me. Yeah. That's just something I have felt that I feel like at 10 points, there is no change in, I mean, I guess it depends what team. Yes, the Eagles are not going to throw a single pass. Buffalo is going to keep throwing passes. So, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not sure where that line of demarcation is. It may be statistically back, and I may be completely wrong from a correlative standpoint. But I really wanted to highlight one that I didn't want it to sound negative. He is doing yeoman's work. And part of this, and I've done this myself, part of trying to innovate and pioneer is willing to make mistakes. In fact, I'll have anybody know, this is the God's honest truth. I had a few, they are legitimate experts in the field. I had Russell Carlton, he's a baseball brilliant, just intelligentsia, explained to me that when people started to deploy the idea of stabilization, statistical stabilization, he said they were misusing it for like the first 8 years. So imagine if you were one of those people bucking that and you were getting browbeaten being about how wrong you are by an entire industry of geniuses, mind you, for an entire decade. Right? Think about that, people. Don't mind. That's another one that comes from my show totally. Buck the trend, man. I make all my money going against the public. Trust me, if you see a ship full of people going this way, you're going to see the big man like this. I don't ever follow the trend. So hats off to Dwayne. He is really the GOAT. And I wanted to mention those split stats. All right, now let's do just a little bit of football for 2022. Okay, I need to use that big brain of yours. Okay, right. So again, I'm working on MLB around the clock. I have, you just kind of retain things. I know as I transition the blind spots I have. So I'd like you to put a light on my blind spots that I know a lot of people have. This is where you come in. To me, again, we've talked about things that matter, right? To me, statistics from last year, almost they're at the bottom of the priority list. To me, the most important things are the things that might change the tendencies that I'm looking for, right? I mentioned pace and QB play and things like that. Generally, that's manifested in things that are not sexy for fantasy or for news and notes, by the way. Like, offensive linemen move, no one bats an eye, sometimes coordinators move. Nothing could be more impactful for a fantasy team. I think a coordinator is more important than a wide receiver move, right? But the wide receiver is trending on Twitter. The offensive coordinator are people you might not even hear them mention. So talk to us about that. It could be anything. I kind of put the whatever stupid stuff I could think of, offensive line, coordinators, defensive moves. What changed as far as landscapes that we need to know for next year that someone like myself that hasn't been following, I'm not through all 30 teams yet. You do those excellent podcasts, but each one is a dedication, and I gotta get through it, man. So it's a labor of love, but could you give us a summation, the big changes to look for?
Yeah, especially in terms of, coordinators and things of that nature. So with the New York Giants, Brian Daboll, ex-Buffalo offensive coordinator, now running things in New York. And one of the low-key signings that I think went on the radar was they signed Tyrod Taylor to be Daniel Jones's backup. I mean, Daniel Jones might not look like, your perfect idea of this dual-threat quarterback, but that's what he is, man. His legs are the best part of his game. And Daboll, seeing what he was able to do, again, I mentioned this earlier, but like Josh Allen, before he was really good in real life, he was still really good in fantasy. There's a chance that Daniel Jones, if he can stay healthy, is going to have the sort of rush attempts to just be a good fantasy, bad real life quarterback. And when you start looking at that offense, man, Saquon's ADP is finally getting up there, but Kenny Galladay, Kadarius Toney, like these are some of the cheapest wide receivers in fantasy and that have a legit chance to lead their entire offense and targets right there alongside the New England Patriots. So something to keep there in mind in New York. With the Vikings, Kevin O'Connell, the Rams offensive coordinator, coming over to be their head coach. And oh my gosh, Justin Jefferson and the Cooper Kupp role. Shut up, everyone. Justin Jefferson has had probably the best 2-year stretch to start a career in NFL history. Like, who cares about a couple more snaps in the slot? He's going to be fine. Now, what is interesting is the Vikings going from one of the lowest teams that use 11 personnel to probably one of the highest that the Rams were. So that means KJ Osborne, someone that's actually going to be on the field enough now to maybe give us not huge production, but I would say why.
Can you explain that for new listeners? 11 personnel. Again, this is the advanced stuff not everyone knows. Yeah.
You're good. Yeah, 3 wide receivers. So before the Vikings, really a ton of 2 tight end sets. But now coming again, what Sean McVay has done in Los Angeles is just use 11 personnel, make everything look the same a lot of times. And that's why we've seen them enable, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, Brandon Cooks, even Sammy Watkins had 8 touchdowns in a year there. So hopefully in Minnesota should be more pass first. And Adam Thielen, in addition to KJ Osborne, should be on the field all the time. Plus, Tyler Higbee, someone that never left the field for the Rams, is now that his role in Minnesota goes to Irv Smith, who doesn't have to deal with Tyler Conklin, doesn't have to deal with Kyle Rudolph. The only other tight end they brought in this offseason was Johnny Munt, who is a block first player who played with O'Connell in Los Angeles. Literally the most ideal second tight end we could add to this team in order to not worry about Irv Smith's routes. So really think Irv Smith and KJ Osborne are low-key winners from that. Miami, as everyone knows, probably remembered at some point, Mike McDaniel, the 49ers offensive coordinator in town. If he's going to run the whole offense through Waddle and Tyreek, good things should happen. We'll say, though, the 49ers have historically been a pretty slow-paced offense under Shanahan, and they've been pretty run first. So I'm just a little bit concerned about the overall volume in Miami. With the Raiders, Josh McDaniels now doing his thing. As interested as we are in the Patriots running back room and who's going to be the pass down back, we don't seem to have the same allure for the Raiders. And it could be Kenyon Drake, man. As I was doing this study, looking at guys who had the largest difference in their fantasy rankings from standard to PPR, and Drake was popping in it. And Drake is someone that's not even drafted a lot of times. So I'm not trying to make this you need to draft Kenyon Drake segment, but we do need to pay mind to who the pass catching running back is going to be in Vegas. As much as I believe Josh Jacobs can handle it, it's kind of like the Antonio Gibson thing where I just don't think he's going to get it. They brought in Brandon Bolden, Amir Abdullah, like every running back the Raiders kind of brought in, and they restructured Drake, so they seem to be good enough with him. But every running back they brought in was a pass catching specialist. So you just got to kind of read between the lines there. And for them to go ahead and draft, spend a 4th round pick to get Zamir White, do think could be, not so many good days ahead for Josh Jacobs. With the Jaguars, Doug Peterson and Press Taylor now basically bringing that offense over to, please, for the love of God, save Trevor Lawrence. But, James Robinson, guys, tore his freaking Achilles in late December. Don't assume he's going to be back by week 1, if even at all this season, man. So Travis Etienne is someone where we've heard these whispers like, oh, are they going to use him in the Deebo Samuel role? Once again, screw that. He could be an every down running back in the Christian McCaffrey role. How about that? And that's really what we should be looking for out of Etienne. And even if James Robinson comes back, man, I think Etienne is still going to arguably have a sort of like DeAndre Swift-esque role on the table for him because of his pass down chops. Last 2 situations are actually pretty similar. So the Broncos brought in Nathaniel Hackett to be their head coach, the Green Bay offensive coordinators. The Bears' new offensive coordinator is Luke Getsy, who was actually the QB coach with Hackett. Obviously, Matt LaFleur was the one calling everything. So when we have these Shanahan, McVay, and LaFleur coordinators, it's always kind of tough to tell, like, are they just going to run that guy's offense, or are they going to now kind of unleash their own thing now that they're the man in charge? But I will keep in mind, because both these teams have a trendy late round tight end, Cole Kmet for the Bears and Albert O. I'm not even going to try to pronounce your last name, bro, for the Broncos. So I would say, though, with the Packers, man, they really have leaned on tight end committees each of these last 2 years. Since LaFleur has been there hasn't been a tight end get even 60 targets in a season. I mean, Robert Tonyan goes off for like 12 touchdowns, 11 touchdowns, wherever it was in 2020. Like, he was struggling to play 50% of the offensive snaps before he got hurt in 2021. Like, yeah, he was still their lead, Dolchich in the 3rd round, who's a receiving friendly tight end. And they signed a block first guy in Eric Tomlinson. And the Bears, man, like, they brought in James O'Shaughnessy and Ryan Griffin, who none of these guys I think are going to overtake Kmet or Albert O as the leading receiver, but they don't need to, man. If you have 2 or even, God forbid, 3 tight ends in a regular rotation, usually you can't even get enough pass volume for 1 tight end to really stand out in fantasy land. So I lean towards guys like Irv Smith, like Tyler Higbee, ahead of Albert O and Cole Kmet. Even if you might think that, those other tight ends are a little bit better, I'm just way more confident in some of these other players' ability to be on the field the whole time.
Man, that was really an excellent job. That was so comprehensive, Ian. Really excellent job. But you're making me worried because I've kind of been short the Giants' offense. Trading terms, I've been short the offense. I'm not. Oh gosh, it was such a disaster. Jones, I understand he can run, so I do. Again, I think maybe that's part of the disparity in formats. And here we go, right into the next topic as we kind of round. I was going to say round 3rd. I guess we're in the red zone. Let's punch the ball in, right? Now, I worried about that, and I think that's the obvious stuff. You mentioned something I really wanted to get to. It's the Green Bay Packers. So that sucking sound, for anybody, if you listen carefully enough, is the target vacuum created by Devontae Adams leaving. I mean, as if someone would have pulled like a plug out of the Atlantic Ocean. Like, they're really, and it's funny, we use the term target tree. I've actually expanded on it in my own analysis where it really works very well. I'll give you an example. The Miami Dolphins are a bonsai tree. It's very short, very, right? Branches everywhere. The Green Bay Packers were the sprawling redwood of California. A single trunk, the thickest 3,000-year-old trunk reaching to the sky. But now that, what grows in place of the redwood? Right? Now, we're not talking about actual biology, right? But what, this is like the question of questions for me, at least, because I'm, again, an opportunity-based trader, just like you mentioned. The commodity in fantasy in general is opportunities. I want to maximize opportunities. The largest opportunity share that I can remember in a decade without researching, Davante Adams. Now, granted, I know from my focus on pace stats, Green Bay not that attractive outside of Davante, including Aaron Rodgers, because they're so slow-paced. It really, and again, I know he's great, but that's where people mix, I think, real life and fantasy. I'm not really drafting a guy like Rodgers. I want more giddy up. I want less defense. I almost want a worse team because I want more pressure on them at the end of the game. What happens in Green Bay? In theory, there's enough offense for at least 2 or 3 people. You have people saying Lazard, 140 catches. And I'm like, maybe. I'm like, isn't Tanyan? I felt like I also told people, wow, Tanyan's a 550-1 guy, right? No. Wait, what? Where are they going? What's going to happen there? So, Ian, talk to me about the Green Bay tree. What rises from the ashes there?
I guess if you look at their offense and you're like, all right, who are the best players out here? I think it's the running backs. I think it's Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. And that's why I've really tried to be ahead of consensus on A.J. Dillon, especially because we've seen it. We saw last year with Dillon. We've seen it briefly with Aaron Jones, but Jamal Williams, who's a good running back in his own right, has always kind of made it a committee thing for Jones. But if one of these guys gets hurt, the other guy is going to have a full-fledged 3-down workhorse role. It's probably going to make them a top 5 weekly running back option. And you can't say that for some of these other guys that are being drafted in the same range as A.J. Dillon. I mean, Josh Jacobs, Antonio Gibson, Cordero Patterson, Elijah Mitchell, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Miles Sanders. I don't think these guys they're like multiple injuries away from that happening, if it's even going to have a chance to. And Dillon, you could argue, especially 49ers, I think Tyrion Davis-Price is going to make this more of a committee than people realize. As we know, it's CPAT. I mean, they're going to have Algier. I guess he's a little bit lower, but Philly uses a committee. Washington uses a committee. Raiders use a committee. Cleveland uses a committee. Like A.J. Dillon straight up could just have more uses than these guys. And again, his ceiling is Tony Pollard level, if not higher, from a pure handcuff standpoint, if something does happen to Aaron Jones. The Aaron Jones splits without Davante Adams have been well publicized, and for good reason. They're bonkers. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is comfortable feeding the ball to Aaron Jones when he does not have Davante Adams out there. So I will say that, like, Dillon can catch the ball too. Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon each had 4 games last year with 40-plus receiving yards. So I know Aaron Jones is much better, but there was a concern with Dillon coming out of Boston College because he only had like 8 or 15 catches or whatever. But, we saw this with Jonathan Taylor a little bit too. Like, okay, I'm not confusing Dillon for someone like Aaron Jones or Austin Eckler. There is a high top tier of a receiving running back that I don't think Dillon or Taylor will ever get into, or like Nick Chubb, but these guys can catch swing passes. These guys can catch screens. Like, really, like Ronald Jones is kind of like the only running back that it just seemingly can't even do that sort of stuff sometimes. So love Dillon. He's my RB22 right now, maybe even moving a little bit higher here soon. And also Aaron Jones, my RB9. Only like Aaron Jones, basically my number 1 running back. I guess Austin Eckler. Aaron Jones is like a little bit of a discount Austin Eckler, honestly, because if you just look at kind of the top 10 running backs, at least mine, Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, Eckler, Dalvin Cook, Najee Harris, Leonard Fournette, Saquon Barkley, and Aaron Jones. Like, those are the only Jones and Eckler are the only 2 running backs that don't have these like full-fledged 3-down roles. And that's why I've considered pushing down Eckler a little bit more, man. But the thing is, in full PPR, just those historically, one target is worthy of about 2.7 rush attempts. Yep. Like, it's just such like a numbers game again when you're just dealing with someone like Eckler who can legit catch 80+ passes in a single season. So Jones, Dillon, Tunyon's fine. He's going late enough. Keep it. It right. Like he has a pretty good chance to be suiting up week 1. Just remember, coming back from that ACL could have some complications there. At wide receiver, Lazard, If he falls, I'm taking him, but it's just so tough to prioritize him in that wide receiver 3 range when, man, I know it's Rodgers, but I think the most likely outcome, Lazard should be out there all the time, but they have these other pieces where it's going to be Sammy Watkins, I think Christian Watson probably rotating. I know it's Watkins. He did it with Rashad Bateman last year. Like he just does this. He's a progress stopper, unfortunately. But as long as he's on the roster, I think they could rotate. And then they're going to have Randall Cobb and Amari Rodgers in the slot potentially rotating. Romeo Doubs is out there as well. And hell, like if there is a team that could be adding Julio Jones or Will Fuller still, Green Bay sure as hell looks like it. So I will continue to draft Julio Jones round 17, best balls of all shapes and sizes in the meantime.
Yeah, at first I kind of had a sourpuss on for the video people because, again, focusing on opportunities, I think I overlooked Green Bay because of my perception of a split, also my perception of Dylan really being kind of awesome, maybe not realizing that they could share more time, and then if that's the case and that version of the offense makes them palatable, if they were to go down, like you said, if someone were to go down, the other one is like the benefactor and an auto, whatever, top 7 RB overall, like automatically, you know what I mean? There's really no argument, right? So
real quick, one of my favorite things with Dylan, because we were talking about how stats can get skewed and stuff earlier, and one of the stats I think is yards after contact, because a guy can just break a tackle at the line of scrimmage and then run for a 70-yard touchdown. He gets 70 yards after contact, and it's like, well, like good job breaking the tackle, but I just think sometimes because of that, like Tony Pollard has a really high yards after contact, but we're not really seeing Pollard like drag piles all that much. So what I did, and with our cool PFF tools, I looked at just the number of carries that got at least 2 yards after contact. So what guys were like consistently kind of dragging players a little bit. Number 1 in the NFL, 75.5% of his carries at least 2 yards after contact, A.J. Dillon. And that adds up. Look at that freaking guy. We've all seen his thighs. Like, it makes sense to me that A.J. Dillon is tough as hell to get to the ground, because that's what we see every time we put the film on.
For the baseball people out there, Ian just did exactly what we do, right? When we talk about the difference between using contact stats and then using rate stats, because these things matter. Hat tip, Ian the GOAT. Okay, you did mention one name. We're going to get out of here in a minute. And it's going to tie into the last theory, and then that's going to get us out the door. You mentioned Christian Watson. Pricing rookies is very difficult. I think you can succeed as a wideout. I also tend to draft my perception of opportunities. And I'm talking about best ball right now, I should say. Yeah. To me, it's not redraft season yet. I think I like to wait for more pieces. If I'm going to put real money on redraft, I want to wait. I want to get closer. I don't want anyone to lose their first round pick if there's $1,000, $2,000 on the line. That's not my style. Yeah. Best ball is what it's all about right now, because I think it's a good way to see the puzzle, the changing pieces and all that stuff. I like to draft kind of in pockets, and I'm trying to maximize roster space. So I have found, and I guess this is my fight me thing, although I tweeted it, nobody cared, which I kind of figured. I'm the no wide receiver guy. Now, it's not Watson, but it is similar players in that ilk. You and Dwayne were speaking about them before. There's an entire pocket of wideouts that are, I don't know, the number 1, 2, or 3 target on their team that are going really late. The inverse of that, right, because everything in fantasy drafting is about opportunity cost, which I don't really understand. This is where the market and I are very disparate in our approaches. I don't understand zero RB, because I feel like the market is drafting almost consistency and totals. Best ball, I'm trying to draft spikes. So I feel like the spike running backs are all early, because or you're going to fall behind. You can't. I've seen these teams from super sharp people. I mean, that's what makes me. It's not me making me say, "Ha, he's wrong." It's making me say I'm probably wrong. But what's getting me is you have entire rosters of backup running backs that theoretically could give you nothing for the first 3 or 4 weeks. I don't know how you plan on winning a large-scale tournament if you don't get out of the box fast. I believe you need high scores throughout. Somebody will. So I've just been more like, I don't know, everyone's kind of zigging, and I guess it's cheesy. I'm zagging. I don't know, man. For example, in redraft, I take the last quarterback, whoever the last, whatever. I'll choose from the last guy. I'll figure it out. You spent money on Mahomes. If he stinks, you can't replace him. So not only do I get the advantage of selecting my own guy, I get the choice in the free agent pool if somebody kind of breaks out. In best ball, to me, it's like Josh Allen, who is potentially the number one player. If I had to put a favorite odd on who the number one player overall is going to be, he'd probably be in my top 5 or 6 off the top of my head. Yet he's going in the 3rd round, and he plays a position that people are using 3 roster spots to fill. When if you get Josh Allen, you could just take whatever, Mariota at the back end. Because remember, you have to kind of think in terms of success if you're going to win. This is my opinion, of course. I could be way off. When I worked at FTN, I had Elliott on. He's mad sharp. And he had said, man, what was it? It was the Colts. We don't plan for Peyton going down. That was the quote he said. And he's right. So when you draft the best ball, right, you don't plan for Allen going down. You draft Allen in the 3rd. You expect he's going to play every week. You get 1 draft replacement. That's it. Yeah. Same thing for tight ends. You get 1 guy maybe in the middle. Running backs should be in the front. That leaves wide receivers in the middle and the back. So I've just been feasting on, like I said, it's not really Watson, but now I see Sky Moore, who you guys were talking about, he's really fallen, or Olave on the Saints. He has a potential to be the number 1 target overall on that team, and he's really kind of fallen. We mentioned Lazard has a chance to be a number 1 target. You mentioned Dotson on Washington has a chance to be a number 2 target. Now, if I'm chasing,
you got Myers and Parker and New England.
Okay, yeah. I've actually been talking about the Patriots stack is one of my favorites, and again, the hemming and hawing and eye rolls, and I'm like, wait, why? And I know the argument before it gets to me is New England's too conservative. Stop looking at the box score. That you could almost feel them remove the throttle, and I remember my notes were like, Mac Jones, too conservative. Mac Jones passing up deep throws for checkdowns to his own detriment. By the time we got to the end of the year, I was like, exciting move by Mac Jones. And that was the prevailing thread. So I actually think the Patriots are about to take a step forward in terms of pace. And guys like Parker and Bourne are both going to be pretty good as far as an opportunity standpoint. Why am I taking wide receivers up front, Ian, if my perception of spike is random? I so believe in variance that, like, even Devontae Adams, he's going to have games that he goes 3 for 17, but the running back that you swap him for is not. So talk to me about pockets. I know I threw a lot at you. 0 wide receiver and my perception of pockets of talent and opportunity considering limited roster spots, right? Because that's the whole thing. We're talking best ball where I can't replace these guys. You're married to them. So I don't really want guys that need 8 injuries. So I almost have all my running backs before the 12th or 13th round. I have 1 quarterback, Josh Allen, namely up front, and my whole back is wide receivers like I named to you before. I have a ton of Nico Collins and I don't know, guys that I think. Yeah, I don't know. Again, I don't think he's going to be great, but is he going to deliver 2 spike weeks? Maybe. So talk to me about 0 wide receiver and how stupid I just said it.
I think it's all. I think all strategies have a place in a draft where they probably are the optimal strategy. The problem is, it's like the 0 RB thing became like a cult following. It was just weird. People were just doing it to do it, basically. So from that standpoint, no, I'm not just going to go into the draft with my strategy already made up kind of before the pieces start falling. Because, as someone, that is, I think I've done probably like 50 best ball drafts here since the NFL draft concluded. I'm skipping up values and I'm playing the news cycle where, we got Treylon Burks right now falling down into round 9 and round 10 because of just these maybe asthma, maybe workout problems that Tennessee's known about. And that, we wouldn't even care about if it wasn't just NFL media circus going crazy throughout the month of June. So, trying to play the news cycle, I think, is a good way of, just, again, getting good values if you're going to be doing a lot of these drafts. Personally, I've kind of been with you where I've regularly find myself getting at least 2 running backs, if not 3, inside the first 3 or 4 rounds of these drafts because there are more workhorses, I think, than we're seeing. And that kind of has been the dying breed in the NFL. I think that's why wide receivers got boosted. I mean, you look at, I believe in the year 2000, there were 19 different running backs that had at least 300 touches. Like last year, it was 4. And, maybe it will stay around 4. Like it has been a downgoing trend. But when you start looking and you see guys, Cam Akers going like RB 18 to RB 20, this is a guy that could could have the Todd Gurley role. And like that sort of, the concern about, oh, he sucked last year with his efficiency in the playoffs and maybe Henderson makes a committee. Like I like Henderson where he's going too, but like that sort of stuff's already being baked into their reduced ADP. James Conner should be the 3-down running back in Arizona, but it's just one of these things like, oh, he'll probably get hurt. It's like, well, they paid him,
right.
If they paid him $20 million, like if he doesn't get hurt, he's going to be on the field all the damn time, catching a lot of passes too. Like Kyler Murray, one career QB sneak. Like it's always going to be James Conner around the goal line, the way they do things there in Arizona. So yeah, I do think I'm more, and the big thing too, specifically, I'm cool getting one or multiple of like the top 12 wide receivers, but you start seeing red flags really fast. And one thing you brought up earlier, which I thought was sharp, was the college teammates already having reps with those quarterbacks. Like, I believe right now, if you just look at a typical ADP for the wide receiver position, it's only about 10 or 11 wide receivers in the top 24 that are playing with the same quarterback as they did from last season. Now, obviously, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, we are happy that Russell Wilson is there.
Right.
But man, like to just look at Pittsburgh and be like, oh, going to Mitch Trubisky and a first round rookie is for sure going to be an upgrade. Like I know Ben sucked, but maybe they suck too, man. So we really just, when there is a new quarterback coming into town, we need to really think hard on that the same way we do when there's a new play caller or something like that. So with wide receivers, once you get past, I'd put like my top 12 is Kupp, Jefferson, Chase, Diggs, CD, Evans, Adams, Hill, Higgins, Debo, Keenan, and Mike Williams. I think we can probably give AJ Brown the benefit of the doubt because he's just that freaking good. But once you get past that, man, like, yeah, I have certain guys I have more confidence in, Michael Pittman, Terry McLaurin and stuff, but there is at least one red flag for like the next 15 on wide receivers like Gabriel Davis, Allen Robinson, Brandon Cooks. So give me the workhorse running back. I'll take whatever wide receiver 2 slides down because these tiers of wide receivers, I feel like, are super deep. You see it again kind of in the wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 range where it's like, Alan Lazard versus Marquez Valdes-Scantling. I'm not going to reach on those guys, but if they start falling, fine enough. And if they don't start falling and instead Brandon Ayuk or Kadarius Toney does, like, okay, there's so many good wide receivers and there's not so many workhorse running backs. So give me the more scarce running backs. Like, dude, we're playing for first. If like Ricky Bobby said, first or last, man, like who gives a shit about trying to build the highest floor? Let's go ahead, shoot for the moon. And I think to your other point, like give me more shots at the wide receiver range throughout the entire draft. Cause that's the other good thing. When you take these running backs early, you're done with it. You only need to draft 4 or 5 of them at that point. Just the same way where if you take Josh Allen, you certainly don't need 3 or 4 quarterbacks.
Man, now again, that was awesome. And this is the very last thing, I guess, if we, we could circle back another time to do all the betting stuff. I wanted to be a little selfish, but also thankful and mention the thing I'm working on at The Athletic right now that I had to reach out to you about was I'm developing a triple slash. Again, this baseball kind of bleed over. But I do think shorthand descriptors can be really important, especially when we're talking about usage. So I'll give you an idea of what I'm up to, Ian. I'm going to give you a list because it's going to apply to a conversation you had with Dwayne about the Denver wideouts, and then we're going to get out of here.
Yeah.
So my triple slash is target percentage, air percentage, and A dot, something that PFF, the incomparable PFF, is responsible for. The idea being, right, I'm trying as quickly as possible to describe a wide receiver role as best as possible using input statistics. Again, this comes from my baseball stuff. I don't care about earn run average. I don't want to know. I almost don't care about, like you said, receiving yards to me is a dirty stat. Garbage in, garbage out, everybody. To me, it's a garbage stat. Now, granted, yes, a guy like Debo could run over a dump truck. We understand that. But to Ian's point before, if you juke, right, if a counter is run to a back end screen, to a one-on-one defensive scenario where a running back defeats a corner for whatever reason, you can't give the guy 80 yards of credit for that. Now, granted, if we marked this stat and it had a ceiling, right? So let's say yards after catch had a 10-yard ceiling. That I would use, that would be more along the lines of what Ian was talking about. So again, target percentage, air percentage, A dot. Total of frequency, total of volume, and then depth, just to give you an idea, because that really is important. Check it out. Bench, let's call it gold standard elite. So John's elite triple slash. Target, air, and A dot would be 20, 25, and 10.5. Right?
Yeah.
Only 25 wideouts achieved this last year. Only 25. And it's a hell of a list, probably everybody you'd expect. AJB, Allen Robinson, Antonio Brown, Brandon Cooks, Calvin Ridley. Stop me when somebody stinks. CeeDee Lamb, DJ Moore, Darnell Mooney. That's an interesting name. Maybe not everyone knows, right? Not that they don't know, but they're onto it like that. DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Parker. Two sharp guys just mentioned him. Devontae Smith, DK Metcalf, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Kyle Pitts, Mark Andrews, separating themselves again from the pack statistically, beyond the anecdotal understanding that they're top targets, safety blankets, that and 325 get you on the bus, whatever course here. But continuing on, Mike Williams, a little bit of hope in LA. I was a little let down, but the input stats are there. Stephon Diggs, T. Higgins, McLaurin, Tyler Lockett, Tyreek Hill, and one Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy on that list with the cream of the crop, with the crappiest quarterback scenario imaginable. So because I opened my big mouth, now I'm going to be backing Jerry Jeudy in a big way, hoping that adding Russell Wilson there kind of takes them to the next level. I think, though, because of his price, whether it's Sutton or Jeudy, you have to get Patrick. I feel like that's an absolute must. So I think you made an excellent point. Anybody that missed it, you should be listening to all Ian and Dwayne stuff. Regardless, it really is the best. But you guys were going through this, and what I really enjoyed the most was the back and forth of, you're like, yeah, I get it. But he outproduced him, right? And Dwayne's like, yeah, but that's what I'm doing. I'm Dwayne. And I'm like, but statistics and inverted. But if we reverse the polarity and just get it to 1.21 gigawatts, Jerry Jeudy is going to make 180 catches. And you're like, yes. But Tim Patrick on Earth, right? Patrick is actually making catches and doing his thing. My thing is this. Where's the girl? Why not both? What's three? What's both for three? Why not all? Jeff. Russell could probably carry those. Remember, he was in a pretty limited scenario himself as far as skill positions go. I think he made Lockett more than he should have been. And I think Metcalf is a superstar. But I think maybe Russell might be able to feed all three of these guys. And if you grab two, similar to your point about Green Bay, you get two guys that could be viable now with the pathway to really succeed. What do you think about that? Did I swing you on Jerry Jeudy greater than Simon Patrick?
No, did not.
Yes.
The whole thing with Jeudy, we're like, I've seen the comparison with him and Gabriel Davis. It's like the same amount of targets and the yards aren't that far off. And it's like, oh, look, Gabriel Davis just scoring touchdowns because he has Josh Allen and Jeudy doesn't. And it's like, okay, then why is Tim Patrick scoring touchdowns? Like what's going on here? Because Tim Patrick was better than Cortland Sutton last year too. And it's these first round receivers, man. And Jeudy, for him to come back after the ankle injury he had in week 1 to begin with, just fair play to him for making that happen. And I've seen the wide receiver cornerback ISO camps. The guy is obviously a fantastic route runner, but man, when we see another receiver in the same offense putting up these big numbers, that's when I just have a hard time completely giving Jeudy the benefit of the doubt. And if you're going to use a legit top 24 pick on the guy, I just haven't gotten too much Jerry Jeudy. I haven't ranked inside my top 30 receivers, so I'm not, the world's biggest hater. But we need to realize too, this is not the Broncos team, the coaching staff, or the front office that used a first-round pick on Jerry Jeudy. That was John Elway a couple years ago, and he is no longer involved in this. Now it's George Patton. George Patton, the two moves that he made at wide receiver were extending Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick at the end of last season. So both of them, obviously Sutton got the bigger deal, but both of them are now locked into Denver for the foreseeable future. And again, that was George Patton's job. So KJ Hamler coming back from the dislocated hip is like one of the worst injuries you can have in addition to the knee. Apparently his progress is going well, but a pup list is certainly, a possibility there. So if not though, man, I think Hamler probably, if he's going to be taking someone off the field, I think it's probably going to be Jeudy in the slot. You look at Green Bay, I believe they ranked 21st in 11 personnel, 3+ wide receivers, just overall under Nathaniel Hackett and Matt LaFleur. So there's a chance that we see more Alberto and Greg Dulcich, more 2 tight end sets. Like there is a chance that we look up at the snap rates at the end of week 1 and Sutton and Patrick are 90% plus. Jerry Jeudy's closer to 60, 70 just because of the way they might run their offense. And yeah, man. So I just think there are a few more holes in Jeudy's. Like I'm Sutton over Jeudy. And then at that point, when Tim Patrick's going outside the top 50 wide receivers, like it's just not even close to me. So I just think at some point, like, what does it take for us to appreciate Tim Patrick again on the same amount? Like, why is he putting up more yards and touchdowns than these guys if he's not the better wide receiver? Like, with the amount of hoops we have to kind of jump through to put down Tim Patrick and some of these other guys, it's just bonkers to me sometimes, man. So you can like Jerry Jeudy and stuff, but my God, like Tim Patrick, pretty damn good as well. Come on.
Yeah, you know what it is, really, and you're dead on. You're dead on, right? You're only taking flack for me because you're over the target, really. But I think, especially because right now, again, I'm very focused on this kind of best ball type of thinking. I think there's a spot for a Denver stack, but outside of that, I think I really have to agree after hearing it out. It's kind of hard to get with Jeudy at price in a vacuum, right? So, you probably agree if you're targeting Denver, I think he's probably a key piece of that, right? So if you think Denver is going to be a low own stack, or I don't know, you have another kind of correlative to it or something, I believe Jeudy is a good part of an overall best ball tournament because, yeah, he could go to the moon. And I like to think in terms of secondary pieces, Patrick really going far enough back that you can push him up. You mentioned this the other day. Gosh, Ian, I just really love your style because it's just very well. No, dude, you're very, very, very transparent and upfront and willing to kind of eat lowercase L's. And you said something with ease that a lot of people really struggle with, and it's all right. If I'm connecting pieces, part of my calculus is, and it wasn't these players in particular, but it's the same handcuffs, whatever it is. You have Jeudy, you want Patrick. Don't be too cute. Get him. Move him up the round. Get him. Because without him, that whole formula really could fall apart fast, right? And that's what I think. I love, you often talk about that. It's this connection. I mean, I forget, you put it really eloquently. You really did, about, it wasn't like a butterfly effect thing, but it's that. Yeah, people ask me, pick A or pick B. It's not that. The same way I hit you with zero wide receivers. Dude, it's not that. The only thing that probably is wrong is, like you said, to go in predetermined. Now, you can tell yourself, this is what I'd like to do. But if the room doesn't allow you to execute, you really should be pivoting and know better. So, again, to you and your just willingness to be so open with us, the listener, but in your own process. And I think it's really important. Again, you're just like, what's beyond modest? You're probably beyond modest, but I think that's really part of your, what makes you so effective in your work, right? Because it's funny, you would think the most effective work is the person, this is this and this, and you're not. You're very much like, we're going to just, let's everyone relax. Let's just kind of put it down. And the outcomes are going to happen. I often say in baseball, right? I don't throw the ball. I don't swing the bat. So I can only apologize to you so much. And I don't know if you do the amount of work that you do the same way I do. Part of it is because I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to get yelled at for missing and losing. I showed you everything I got. I pulled the curtain. Here's pages and pages and pages of notes and math equations. And that's what I got. We do the best we do, and we kind of let it fall from there. God damn, Ian, if something ever happens to Dwayne, if he were to be struck by a bolt of lightning,
Hey, knock on some wood.
I might blame some of the podcasters in this room. I'm just kidding, man. Everybody, Ian Hartitz, the GOAT of all GOATs, PFF 40. You got to get with Ian. If you're not with Ian and the boys with PFF, you will be left behind, right? Because they're doing things differently. I have found football statistics are very limited, and in their limitations, they're not very useful. So if you're not with the guy on my this way, whatever we're doing with reverse inverted cameras, Ian, whatever, we're best friends for life. I hope it now. At least I'm telling people that from now on. I'm about to text everyone I know that me and Ian are best friends now. No, man, what do you got to close us out? That's about it. Once I start rambling, we're off the rails. It's over, man.
PFF Fantasy Football Podcast, PFF.com, all good things. But yeah, man, I'm about to watch some freaking fights. We got Yair Rodriguez and Brian Ortega about to scrap in the UFC here a little bit later. I love that shit, man. I don't hate baseball. I hold a grudge against it because once kids started throwing curveballs, I wasn't any good anymore. But back in the day, I mean, it was right there with football with me in terms of playing. I still try to watch my call them the Cleveland Guardians these days. So I still try to, I still enjoy a good night, good day out at the park. But otherwise, man, just give me two human beings fighting. I think that's
so good.
That's my favorite sport other than football for sure.
You know what's funny, man? I somehow got away from it. And this is the God's honest truth. Like, I could even describe some of it. I had the VHS tapes, the David versus Goliath. When it was illegal, I had all that stuff. I was really into it. We were following Dan Severn and the Gracie tribe. Like, how about this? I remember Hoist Gracie, he had to punch chemo in the balls like 100 times. Remember that dude? That dude came out with the giant crucifix, like a maniac. He came out with a life-size crucifix. Hoist Gracie, who had won like 300 fights in a row, looked like he was about to shite his gi, and he had to cheat. He had to cheat to win that one. That was when they didn't have rules. That was before rounds and rules and stuff. So I go all the way far back, and I just kind of, I lost it, but gosh, I really do love it. All right, that's it. We're talking about golf and baseball and UFC. The football pod's over. All right, everybody, please rate, review, and subscribe to the football pod here. Press the cartoon thumb. Give me all of your animated fingers, because that's how we rate human beings now. No one's like, hey, John's really smart. It's in he's nuanced. How many likes did he get? How many likes? That's how we grade people now on these stupid analytical metrics to please the algorithmic gods. So please just press like. We want to get this pilot off the floor. I think there's a lot of potential here, bringing in people like Ian. I spoke to, man, GOAT after GOAT. I got Chris Meany, Lawrence Jackson, just some of the badasses. All the people that I really like, and I think have something to offer. So that'll do it. Look for us here, NFL Cork Stats Live, once a week. I'll be back after the All-Star break. The big dude with the big mouth from the Big Apple screaming at his computer with baseball stuff. So from Ian Hartitz and all the people at PFF and the gosh darn goats of football and everyone at Mayo Media Net and the big dude, man. We appreciate you all. Enjoy your time. And we'll catch you soon. Remember, when you work this hard, it feels a lot less like luck, yo. Peace.